Well, hello there, and welcome to the very first season and the first episode of We've Got Issues. Because we've got issues. Who hasn't? But these are Comic Republic issues we'll be talking about. I am Agent E, as everyone at the Republic calls me, and today I will be your host where we talk about everything Comic Republic. We've Got Issues is going to be a regular feature where you get to meet the writers and the brains behind all of our Comic Republic stories. With me today, I've got our head of story, who is responsible for taking care of our writers and all of our stories. He's also one of the very early members of Comic Republic, used to work side by side with Jide at the time. Remember those really early days we used to be like in his apartment, scribbling and discussing about new stories. So really, really excited to introduce to you our head of story, Wale Awelenje.
Hi there, hi there, Duve. That was a real introduction. I don't think I have anything more to say.
Oh my goodness.
Glad to be here, and
Really, really glad to have you. Wale is really, really hard to find because he's so busy. He's also a software engineer by day, writing stories by night. And it's really exciting to have you on our very first episode today. I have so many questions, and I know all of our readers do as well. I have looked into our DMs, picked some of the questions, and we'll be asking you right here today. I'm going to read out the very first question for you, and it's really about tier sheet. Now, Comic Republic came up with this particular title called a tier sheet, where there's a lot of conversation around our heroes, our characters, what makes them. Can you tell us a little bit about what is a tier sheet and why is it so important for Comic Republic to have something like that?
okay, interesting. Okay, so there are two ways you can answer this question. You can either go, okay, what is a tier sheet in general, or you can say something like, what is the Comic Republic tier sheet? So I'm going to go straight to what is the Comic Republic tier sheet. So if you take a look at the library on our website, right, you'll notice that we've published two volumes in the past, which we called the Character Bibles. So these are sort of a who's who in the Comic Republic universe. There was this huge collective effort by all the writers, the creators, the artists, pretty much everyone in CR who's ever done any work on any of the things that we've built. And everyone sort of worked together to bring a whole load of sort of apocryphal information, things like the histories of our characters, the histories of the universe, the plans that we have for all our storylines, pretty much everything that we have, sort of bring them together, go through them, make sure we were not spoiling anything that's going to happen in the future, pull out all the nuggets that would be useful to our readers in any way, just kind of put them together into this massive volume. So if you look at the library, you'll see the Comic Republic Bibles, and you can find pretty much any information you want about our characters in there, but they're kind of thick, they're kind of big, right? It's going to take you a long time to go through them. So they work as a reference, but we wanted something which would serve as a sort of something you tear out of that, right? Hence the name tier sheets, exactly. And sort of a vertical slice of the encyclopedia that we have in the Comic Republic Bibles. So the tier sheet is going to be looked a much smaller, much more compact. It's going to be more visual. You're going to see a lot of visuals there. You're going to see sort of quick descriptions of the characters, and the tier sheet's going to be something that you can actually just sort of read through. You can actually go through it, which might be more difficult to do for the Bible, right? You just sort of read through it, and by the time you're done, you have a very good idea of what we have in store for you in the Republic.
Oh, thank you so much for explaining that. One thing I found quite interesting over the last couple of weeks is the modifications to the app. And now I saw on the app that you can actually see how to read Comic Republic books chronologically, if you wanted to follow any different area in the part of our universe. So that's quite interesting. And I really like that the tier sheet gives us an opportunity to just quickly flip through all of the Comic Republic characters and really understand their essence. So I know Comic Republic has a lot of diverse, authentic African superhero stories. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspires our stories, from the Ajes to the Beats to the Vanguards? What is it that moves us? What inspires us to write these stories?
Well, you see, here's the thing. I think by now it should be pretty obvious what inspires us. I mean, before roughly 2 years ago, there were a lot of the inspirations for our stories that were quite hidden. But it seems like after recent events, a lot of these things have sort of gone into the public consciousness. So even though we've been doing this for almost a decade, now a lot of the inspirations of what we've been doing, which are essentially the previously hidden and concealed roots of African history, culture, and folklore, have now become mainstream, right? And a lot of these influences were pretty much what got us into building Comic Republic in the first place. We realized pretty early, because Julia and myself, and of course the other people who started Comic Republic, we're pretty much we're nerds, we're geeks. We love fantasy, we love science fiction, we love genre fiction, speculative fiction, that sort of thing. And we loved history as well. And of course, Jide loves art and he loves aesthetics. And we noticed that we didn't really have much of a confluence of these things when it came to African history and folklore. For instance, if you were watching a history documentary on Africa back in the day, it was always very academic, always very sort of down to earth. There was never, it never sort of stimulated the imagination or took you on a flight of fancy. And we just thought there was a gaping hole there, right? That there was beauty in the history, there was beauty in the heritage. And apart from beauty, there was also drama, there's also conflict, there's also horror, right? There's so many things you can just kind of pull out of it. So these are the things that inspired us. There are a few things that served as a sort of kick to sort of get us going. I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that Chimamanda's TED Talk didn't light a bit of a fire under me, the one where she talked about single stories, because she just sort of crystallized a lot of thoughts that were in my head at the time. But yeah, there it goes. That is it. If you wanted to talk about the inspirations for individual titles, because we've got so many of them, we would be here all day.
Oh, I know, absolutely. And then we'll have no future episodes if we do that, won't we? Let's be back for more in our next previous and in our next set of episodes. We'll definitely be talking a bit more about all of our characters, and you get to meet the writers, the artists behind some of your favorite titles. But today, let's talk a bit about Tear Sheet Even. I realize there's one more coming out, right? Later this month of April, there would be another Tear Sheet coming out. What should we expect, and how is this different from the very first Tear Sheet we had before?
Well, if you take a look at the first tier sheet, it's sort of focused on some of our really popular characters. I mean, you've got like Guardian Prime in there and all that. Some of what we would consider our entry level characters. So Comic Republic, we have a bunch of characters that look very familiar. You sort of look at them and you go, oh, I know who this is, even before you've read a single story about him. You look at Guardian Prime, you instantly know who he is. You don't even need to read the story to know a little bit more. But that's not all we have in Comic Republic. With Comic Republic, we are sort of, how can I say, we're breaking new ground in many cases. So we're taking sort of tentative steps into new worlds. There are some stories that exist within African folklore that are slightly outside the mold of what an established story is known to be, and we're building stories out of some of those characters, and some of that's very scary, and some of that's a little bit exciting as well. I mean, sort of blurring the lines between heroes and villains and so on. And some of these characters are in the next tier sheet. So in particular, for example, you're going to see quite a lot about Visionary, one of our books that's sort of steeped in African folklore. A lot of it is written by Toba Kalejaye, who is one of our writers, that has a pretty incredible point of view regarding a lot of the stories that are generated from that area of culture. So, if you're interested in knowing a bit more about the Comic Republic universe, and without actually having to comb through the entire library, you might want to stick around for the second one, and maybe you'll find something in there that you enjoy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wally. So, some quick questions so we get to know you a bit better. First off, if I were to ask you, would you choose a comic book if you had to spend some time doing something? Would you rather read a very good comic book or read or watch a movie that's inspired by a comic book?
This might come as a bit of a surprise, but I would actually watch a very good movie that's inspired by a comic book.
Interesting.
Indeed. So the reason is comic books and movies, for a very long time, were very, very different from each other. And for a long time, I absolutely preferred comic books because there's something about a comic book, there's something about what it does to your imagination. The pictures on the page, they set the tone for your imagination and then it does the rest. And in many cases, there's nothing that can be done on a screen that's as good as what you can see inside your head. In the last 5, 6 years, that has begun to shift. There is now the capability to put an incredible amount of talent, effort, capability into sort of bringing these things to life. And not only do these movies fill in some of the gaps that the comic book panels sort of leave, they light an even greater fire under the imagination and allow it to go to even more places. So these days, when I'm reading a good comic book, I'm just sort of dreaming about what the movie is going to look like. So why not just skip to the movie?
Oh, interesting, interesting. So, if you were to own one fictional item from any of the movies or comic books you've read or watched, which one would you want to own and why?
Right. I would want to own the Power Gauntlet.
Mm.
So, of course, people would wonder, why would you want to own a Power Gauntlet? I mean, it's going to kill you the moment you use it, right? I mean, you're not Thanos. Um, I would like to own it just because it looks so cool. I would never actually use it.
Are you sure?
It just looks so cool.
Mm.
Absolutely. Even though I can't wear it, I would just love it. So yeah, that is the Power Gauntlet from the movie Avengers Endgame, which is, if anyone who's watching this remembers, it is the sort of reverse engineered technological version of the Infinity Gauntlet that was made by Tony Stark to sort of counter the power of Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet.
Interesting, interesting. Superhero power. Which one would you choose and why?
Now, this is also going to be a little bit weird because for most people, it's teleportation, invisibility, in fact, time travel, all these things.
Mhm.
Um, the capability that I would want to have is the power of the empath.
Hmm.
Because I personally think that everything we do in this life, all the material possessions that we acquire, the attempts to gain influence and so on, they all have an underlying purpose. There is something that we want, and that is we all just want to make meaningful connections with other human beings. That when you go down to it, when you go down to the bottom, the underlying drive behind everything, if you want to become the richest man in the world, to own everything, to live forever, the thing that you actually want is you want meaningful, perfect connections with other human beings. And the power of an empath just lets you just skip to that. You can just kind of walk through a crowd and know exactly how everyone's feeling. And before you know it, you're surrounded only by people who love you. I mean, who can do that? Who else is capable of doing that?
Oh goodness, Wally, you're always so deep. I thought you were just going to say flight. and fly somewhere nice. Always so deep. I mean, it's no surprise at all. I mean, given what it is that you do with us here at the Republic. And that's our show, you guys. Thank you so much for coming and for joining us for this very first episode of We've Got Issues. We've Got Issues. Find them on www.thecomicrepublic.com. Read all of our comic books for free and see you in our next episode where we meet one other of our Comic Republic artists right here on We've Got Issues. Bye.